It is so that the right now with like you get it in that cost flexible stuff going on that fishing like lot of people get rates now to that cost that definitely insurance right now. So definitely for example right now that would just to like convince that to be candidate to like know through that to like let other prospects and definitely I'm looking like not at all even paying any attention to that example. So like I'm even then it's turning into like a product that like someone trying to like forcefully that hopefully pushing away from that the path of that the other right that I think that focus. So like I'm doing right to focus on the different that kind of trying to convince him and just looking putting one more on top of that already pushing down and eliminating one particular candidate of the for example something like that we white sound of the friend trying to like to convince him to like change his mind like I'm saying that's the candidate pushing down one more student candidate of the just like scenario that I'm putting at that point I'm putting like trying to get out into the at that point, I'm totally trying to they're totally trying to like forcefully move him out of that the way uh, of that part of that sort of taking care of onto like what the basically like the scenario that I'm so like that where is probably happening between Sanjo and that Supreme candidate. You are like that Supreme candidate totally or for Sanjo. It's like the scenario that I'm looking and like pushing Sanjo down and maybe even threatening Sanjo to like him that totally moving towards like the baby and like that way like threatening even threatening Sanjon that if Sanjon even gets in his way like this would as for that would be like the consequence with the element in terms of that that's speaking kind of like a villain smile like threatening Sanjon and that would be and but like at that point like him turning back to that question right towards like the end of that which to like the remaining to candidates who will be like frustratingly trying to that process. And at that point, I was like in Sandra's mind, like Sandra was going to think that this is that live like Sandra already having eliminated darkly himself having last born against like ideologies and the sort of like ideologies that having eliminated state or a stupid candidate like this. Let me right now Sandra answer as at that point I'm going to Sandra move it on the mindset of candidacy for like the greater good so that like we the baby would be Sandra would be able to like save Jun-hee and that way so that like that way we could have would not lose uh this like mother and so and so that like the majority of the should be candidates that should like survive that are going to be like seeing around the 9% like for like the greater good like at the friends are at this point wouldn't even be hesitating at all to like eliminate that specific candidate. So like I'm thinking that way right now the today I'm totally putting it being strong on himself that would be like that be pushing that speaking candidate on of into like the bottom and basically eliminating Lisandro himself, like switching it down and like eliminating that studio candidate and clearing up the path for like the remaining studio candidate to like proper that like finish this scenario that I was able to and my PTR. Okay, so like that we must right now with like the scared so right now eating that thing from within that done with chain like and definitely right now for that instant extreme attitudes of that counter sensor is happening to that mental but like I'm going to still that complete often mental to that right now acting an extreme outlets manner where like I'm doing right now after like treating that like I'm doing right now without any delay at all like I'm without much delay at all like I'm doing this way to running into like the first discussion with my friends because like I'm totally like everybody else on that other side would be totally scared to like basically to enter into like the first like that once to get candidate in like the other end like pushing all the other pushing candidates down. So that yeah like I'm trying to think that this as a post of that courage and confidence like I'm putting into straight away taking the lead and like I'm putting them into that straight away running into like the scenario in an extreme direction scenario like I'm putting into straight away without even stopping, without even timing that even the entry into like the prison like I'm so without even care at all like so in an extreme direction scenario like so they're running straight away into like the prison and I'm putting that by sheer lack of strength the moment so they're running straight away running into like the prison itself like so not getting strikes by like the jump rope and everything that into probably crossing into the way like we have to like through such a speedy run like and into straight away itself that making it without any stopping at all like and just straight away making it to like the middle point of the difference and straight away with there being that gap in that middle point of the difference like and one need to jump from that gap to that cross that was uh, cross into like that second half of the because at that point when number when like even like the first swing of like the jump up would be happening towards that would be reaching into that the scenario that I'm in. So like Minso through such an extremely reckless and greedy man of power to Minso would be that the scenario to be that after like how Minso would be trying to like cross the bridge and like that's like the scenario. So like simultaneously while Minso would be jumping from that jumping to that cross that middle gap of that circles would be when exactly when precisely that the jump rope would be swinging and Minso definitely must be able to. So like Minso landing and at that point composition like Minso only that the few people in like the front will get that point as to be that shop that thing was like Minso so he's straight away pushing with that due to that effects of that thing that into it that comes to Minso totally acting out of character and Minso totally pushing everyone in front of Minso that the scenario that I'm developing. And that's why I'm sort of think that that Roman could be candidate to like currently at the very front of like the pitch. Like and when he would be like at that point probably afraid of that and like he would be from behind that into probably that pushing each and every single one of the presiding candidates in like the front of him too. And will be that making it towards like that Roman to be candidate. So right as like if you almost able to make it towards him like I'm putting that by then is when I'm looking like Sanjon would be associated pushing down that other student candidate who had crossed like the after like Sanjon and is like pushing all the student candidates who are trying to like who are trying to like cross the bridge down from like the side where like Sanjon right now from like the cross uh, from like the from later side where like Sanjon right now standing on like so Sanjon right now at that point would be I'm going to be pushing down that like student candidate so that like the Sanjon could say uh, so that like the old man shooting at it could probably cross like scenario that I was so like right now like Minso will be like pushing everyone in front of like Minso and will be making it towards like the old man shooting at where like I'm doing by then feels like Sanjon's health like the old man shooting at like successfully crossing like the it's like the scenario that I'm basically and I'm looking like at that point I'm looking a single at that point, I'm looking like also staring at like the old man candidate after the Sanjon of like the scenario that I'm looking. But like I'm thinking it would be specifically towards like the old man candidate that into just staring. But and I'm looking right then it's like another jump rope swing happening and like Minso successfully jumping. That jump rope is like the scenario that I'm looking. And Minso not moving at that point. It's like Minso will be totally close to like reaching like the end of the bridge that he's still Minso standing there totally unmoving and basically with that after step with like high focus on like that whole one you get into the role standing there and you and like he fully jumping each and every single jump of swing without getting tired like the scenario that I'm looking at. And so I'm looking then with like an actual strain that charging towards like the charging towards like process like the end of exercise is like the scenario that I'm looking. It was like the scenario that I'm sitting for like one like through so the point matter thing I'm only for anything this shows Sanjon and of that Sanjon pushing down that other villain of like singing candidate and that's like pushing all the remaining singing candidate of like the end of the purpose like Sanjon will be pushing him down and eliminating that singing candidate and that allowed like the old man singing candidate to be able to like cross like the generation what Sanjon will be. At that point, the Sanjon to bring with the old man singing candidate as well doing like the very same attempting to do the very same thing that like that other villain singing candidate has done of like basically trying to push everyone off that the end of the like the scenario that I was fun. So but like I'm looking at that point, it will be after like the old shooting candidate would be mean so that would be like next to profit will definitely as I went like the scenario stuff. So like the old shooting candidate the moment he would be like those on himself that don't change the profit with him straight away like instantly turning and facing like means so will be still towards like the uh well towards like the later portion of it which is like the scenario stuff. And that the old shooting candidate like at that point like shouting out at like Minso with like a little smile and basically challenging them to at that point is like so they have to like drop like the just like the scenario. So just now on the spring like the scenario to be and just like the point where like I'm going to would be stopping move with like movement and I would be standing at the bridge and would while staring down like the old man sitting candidate like but stare and like flare on like the organization candidate and like to while like the such as what you like me to be like standing on the bridge and like jumping in and like single thing for the number like the scenario that I'm looking for. And I'm during this time like I'm the remaining Squid candidate like from like the other end like to be that starting that depth journey to cosmic levels at that point, it's like the scenario that. But like still before they would even make able to like make it towards like say like definitely into like after staring down in like the almost candidate for like sometimes like a so that such an athlete stream that totally running towards like the almost candidate with like the scenario that on and that almost candidate like possibly take the chance to like put them to down, but like I'm trying to do that effects of that thing that mentioned it like I'm so we having all that absolute big energy that like I'm running towards like that old man thinking candidate with that has good energy. And I'm looking for that the old man speaking candidate as he would be trying to like push him to down like I'm trying to be that grabbing tightly onto like the old man speaking candidate with like the scenario that I'm saying. That way like I'm saying from like the farther end of like the bridge like I'm like the old man speaking candidate who have all pulled out by that already crossed like the bridge that solely due to like absolute like I'm being taken out by Minsu along with it. And that way, like Minsu and like the old man thinking candidate at that point will be simultaneously getting eliminated by falling down. It's like the Minsu scenario that I was about with the end of the end. So it's like the league as a interesting right now is a time threatening that the candidate who has this left bunch of left to candidate of like the bridge to move and basically it's on like helping like other senior candidates cross like anything since like right now I'm definitely protecting right now without creating like that villain specific candidate will be pushing Sanjay trying to put Sanjay into trying to like that way get to have like Sanjay fall off and basically to get Sanjay eliminated like the scenario that I'm looking at which is like I don't think situation even if like Sanjay totally through Sanjay self like mostly among like the multiple pushing candidates that like Sanjay is like right now helping of like the push Samsung has also helped like that old man shooting candidate as well for like the bridge. Like I'm saying right now, like the scenario to be like a great like I'm thinking like the old man shooting candidate and like that other villain stick shooting candidate right now to be secretly planning to like push Sanjon off and to eliminate Sanjon to definitely mention because like definitely the two of them will be totally they can see it's enraged by seeing like Sanjor helping out like so many sleeping candidates from like the fix right now. It's definitely not but it doesn't create that or like like um I'm bring both like that old man sleeping candidate as well as like the other villains sleeping candidate like that together like putting Sanjor trying to like push Sanjor into like trying to like get Sanjor eliminated as like the scenario that I'm putting and that's why I would bring like scenario to be like Sanjor totally falling, but like after the Sanjor will be falling towards like the bridge while colliding with like a bunch of like swimming candidates who will be trying to like cross the bridge at that point of like the who would have almost reached like the finishing point of the bridge like is another setup. So like that way Sanjong's fall itself like the Sanjong colliding with like other swimming candidates that resulting in like self resulting in like the those uh two swimming candidates is how much jump of like which like Sanjong's police and like ending up falling off like the bridge like and getting eliminated is like another setup. But like in the case of Sanjong and like Sanjong only during the like fall, like Sangam still managing to like fall down and hang on to like that for its definitely might be the impression. So like I'm saying that the Sangam situation at that point would be like Sanjom like struggling in that and giving all of its strength to like basically hanging while hanging on to like the bridge while like the jump rope that's like it being already revealed that like swinging of like the jump rope like it's having increased right now. Like I'm saying like as like the left time will be getting more and more left like I'm saying like a speed the current speed increase would be even increasing for that at that point it's like in the scenario then other people right so like I'm looking like the scenario right now it's more like Sangon told me the in that way being pushed and basically that also thing like Sangon alone like hanging on to like the bridge and at that point I'm offering those two again that will not fit again as well as that old man swinging candidate like he would have already drop the pitch like at that point it will only irritated by Sanjon still not getting eliminated. So like Sanjon at that point would be like struggling and shooting it all with that kind of game trying to like basically get up back onto like the bridge and do that try to like once again cross like the bridge. But like I'm doing that definitely that Sanjon will be so exhausted that Sanjon at that point won't be able to like the scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point I was doing like and at that point I was bringing like an extremely unacceptable manner for like that will not fix candidate that I'm for like the only Chilean candidate who walk in to that field with only food with only data to that Sanjon. Especially with like everything Sanjon having haven't done in like the training reports even from right from like the start itself, that basically having been against what like the really desires of like the online drinking can say like like him by now should have had it, and that would be something from like him being with that absolute grief as well as like and that absolute to like will be having that absolute threat as well towards like Sanjo. Uh, and I'm remembering that for everything so far against what like the old man 15 candidate wants. Like with another that so like I'm remembering definitely the old man 15 candidate like fixing in his mind that like to definitely ensure that Sanjo gets like eliminated. So like I'm putting that way in a totally unexpected manner, like at that point when Sanjo will be hanging on to like the bridge and struggling like at that point like the old man 15 candidate that's what we are especially pushing that villains to gain candidate who will be on the side of like having prospective it's like then like with the man like at that point like the old man Indian candidate like you think that villains is Indian candidate towards where Sanyo may be hanging on like the bridge. So that like has like an attempt to have like that when this Indian candidate get collided with like Sanyo and basically with like the hanging Sanyo and basically that way to like eliminate Sanyo like the original Indian candidate attempting that such a villain extremely villainous presence like the Snarf and zone. But like at that point like that was happening with like even though like government shooting candidate would be pushing like the villains to be candidate towards like the hanging Song Young and then like right as like the villains shooting candidate would be about to collide with like Song Young and between that the jump rope like strike that villains shooting candidate and then between that way that things being sent flying and that way solely due to that scenario alone, like Sanjay not falling off like the bridge and Sanjay still would be struggling and would be hanging on to like this left scenario that happening. Yet like I'm the distance from like the location where like Sanjay will be hanging on like the bridge and like the distance where like the cross distance where like the old man Indian candidate as well as like the bunch of other Indian candidates who will be all not nowhere near as villains like as like old man Indian candidate like who would have crossed like the bridge will be standing like that distance won't be a great distance at all. You know, so like I'm feeling like the old man Indian candidate at that point of the like extremely like a like to and it's like since great and grudge to like eliminate something like I'm feeling like the old man Indian candidate from the already like completed situation like the old man Indian candidate like carefully trying to that get back into like the bridge to that totally system and that way to that use hope and that way to that try to like eliminate like the hanging from the like the scenario that happened. And I'm looking like at that point as like the at that point I'm looking like the old man speaking candidate that doing that and like even making it towards like Sanjon and I'm looking like him using force and trying to like have like the hanging Sanjon fall off like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like I'm doing yet like I'm doing while doing this like I'm doing like him so many losing this like focus that when while like the old man's Putin candidate will be like realistically doing this to that song like I'm being at that point that I'm between like the next twist happening is like the speed of like the swing of like the jump of increasing to this like next phase is like the scenario that I'm doing and that's happening in like the next thing the unexpected manner for like the realistic almost Putin candidate that like I'm doing the instant like the speed of the jump of to the increasing to like next stage like and that very next swing itself like the old man's Putin candidate getting hit by like the jump up and getting eliminated like the scenario that I'm looking right. So like at that point I'm looking that would be when that Sanjana will realizing that like he's in the serious danger was like at that point I'm looking like Sanjana bit of the feeling as kind usually that no matter how extremely exhausted and like void of like energy Sanjana would be feeling at that point that basically that that at that point will be like the only chance for like Sanjana to totally give it the absolute everything to be able to like cross the bridge before like the next stage of like the speeding race of like the jump rope would be happening for like if like someone wants to get cross the bridge in the of the lines of like that absolute threat of like a range of situation that like someone will be able to like foresee at that point. So supplement premise. So like Sanjon at that point while like the jump rope would be already spinning with that increased speed like I'm doing like Sanjon giving him like absolute everything into like pushing him up from like hanging state from like the bridge and like standing up of making it to like barely standing up back to like the bridge. But like at that point, said like the jump rope would be solely making it so close towards like Phantom. So like until the moment Sanyok will be making it to that standing back up on like at that very second it's that time you only have to like make another jump as well to like save himself from that fight of like jump rope like the snarl that other way. So kind of making that jump, and I'm definitely due to that extreme exhaustion, like I'm doing like after that jump, like I'm kind of want to have your like landing perfectly, like the scenario that I'm going to get like I'm referring to that increasing speed of the jump rope, like I'm just going to be that really Sanjay can't take any chance. Sanjay will be that one strongly feel that we can't take any chance. So like even after that landing of that jump, with like Sanjay will be changing to that everything and sprinting across and making it towards like the end of it, because that way Sanjay once again that's clear that like doing the scenario that I was doing. Also, the claims still taken by very much of that, like, even though Sangyong has like, made that promise to that Chelsea to that run back to the option like the bridge to solely for like to save Chelsea like and it's basically remember the premise of like given the scenario to be it seems that league like then you can guide himself that okay that saving Chelsea and basically would be ensuring that like Chelsea cross like the bridge like the scenario that that's right and definitely I was doing like the scenario to be like same going guy totally like having like junkie on with like back and black with like junkies like wrapped around like Pentagon guide and like junkies like like holding on tightly to the Pentagon guide and that will be how like I'm like and then when they're crossing and the what's like happening as like they will be like crossing like on like very they will see like moving like the very left um swinging candidates to like cross like the bridges like the scenario that yet like I'm going definitely while Junkie would be crossing like the bridge definitely running like 22 and that would definitely be better and sitting in my friend is not perfectly to us like definitely would be getting eliminated but like I'm doing like also for like the scenario to be like due to that Minsu like eating that thing from like chain like and something like definitely and that altering like Jinto's like gap to like the point that the point due to that Minsu like and like allow like to gain candidates would be eventually getting eliminated through Minso while they will be crossing the different stores like the English and side. So like I'm looking right now maybe of like on the other part of black will be even though Minso will be eating that thing from the Thanos chain like for its effect to happen like in like a few taking that a few minutes, some minutes, and then like by then, like I'm thinking that among like the remaining three candidates that have to like cross like the like I'm thinking they would all be like uh, they would all be like on the bridge already in like the process of crossing like the bridge while Minso will be getting onto like the bridge once like the effects of like that thing that would be kicking in. It's like a scenario that I'm doing. So like that way, like I'm looking like into would be like pushing all those great number of like to the candidates in front of me at that time while trying to like cross the bridge, like the scenario that I'm doing. Yeah, like I'm doing like eventually resulting in like into as like how they can strike by like the jump rope. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for and like that way like you get eliminated like the other positive that I'm doing. So like this way I'm doing solely to like so I'm doing like definitely the NG point guy as well as Yankee would be having their shot to that cross the bridge getting clear before like the time of leaving. And that Liam looking like with like the speed of like the jump of this I'm going to bring like increasing to like one more stage of like speeding races like certain hours that I'm looking for. So like it will be at that point that I'm looking for like the team of that Yankee as well as like MGCoinGuy would be uh, getting that chance to like cross like the bridge like scenario setup. So like MGCoinGuy given his like between his like has to everything into like while taking in like that load of like carrying jumping on his back like but that increase in like the speed of pendulum of like and like MGCoinGuy doing that good stuff to cross the bridge and I'm looking at quickly I'm looking at the hardest part for like MGCoinGuy would be that middle point of like the bridge where of that gap, like so like a where of that huge jump needs to be made. So like that jump as I'm believing like the moment like when you can guide and jump he will be making that jump. I'm looking of like maybe being at that point that I'm looking like one like 21 guy while having the load of jumping on his like shoulders on his back like I'm sort of making that jump like I'm sort of maybe that in the guy like totally like falling on to like the bridge, not being able to like stand up at that point. It's also like about to do that, and time would be almost about to run out, and like when doing that at that point would be like falling onto like the bridge. Yeah, like I'm looking like both country as well as independent guy would be on the bridge, but like they would have fallen onto like the bridge itself, but like within our certain at that point, like Sanjo would already think that the time time must about to run out, and basically the at like at that point like I'm going as like the jump rope would be and at that point itself I'm going to see like a tempo like falling like onto like the bridge itself, like anything. At that point, Sabam should bring like the time almost about the run out, like Sangyon only running towards like the bridge. And only that Sangyon quickly picking up Janvi onto like that by the time like the jump rope will be once again swing back to like the scenario. And then the bring like the moment Sangyon will be carrying Janvi onto like shoulder, like and the bring like at that point, like the jump rope swing would be happening, and like Sangyon at that point will be making that jump, and then the bring like at that point, like Janvi will be turning back to like the Indian guy. Time will be almost about to go like Janvi will be springing towards like the Indian guy. Uh, and basically, like the Indian guy at that point, like I'm looking at him slowly struggling with that whole extreme explosion and from that jump from that whole impact of like that fall onto like the first half like after taking that jump while having jumping onto that like that midpoint gas area like that would have only cause like maybe any pain to like to like then become guy as well as also the player was under the during that way like then become guy would be like struggling to get up at that point. I like about doing that like the very next jump rope swing like I'm doing that then become guy getting eliminated is like in the scenario that I was about to while Sangyeon was like having Jun-hee on his left back would be as like it would be like the final 1 or 2 seconds like everything at that point like Sangyeon with like Jun-hee on his left back that making it to like the other side of it because it's like the and completing the task is like the scenario that I'm doing either that or like the opposite that I'm doing for like then becoming guy after like while having that load of Jun-hee on his back like while making that middle point gap jump of like that for which like I like the Indian guy would be having that knee pain and everything like the Indian guy will be that either struggling his way into like trying to like fall up or like Sanjo. But like I'm right like right before like the Indian guy will be able to cross like I'm like uh time ending up being over and at that point itself on the front that the fridge instantly collapsing. It's like the scenario that I'm being at like the Indian guy is only falling off to his like elimination at that point. And like for John he like shockingly witnessing that like the scenario that I'm going to the and everything. So like definitely I'm sitting in my preparation for like both mental as well as like the Indian guy so that we not survive like while John as going to always survive like the decision like the scenario. So like the Indian guy as well as like Sanjay said reflecting scenario that I'm preparing as for like the other that I'm super. Okay, so like the new experience right now with like even like London surviving like the attack of like the women's singing and then eliminating and that's still seems like London right now is like helping more people so we get like of like the ways like I'm sitting right now it's like without making it delay so the next person to like attack Sanjana definitely I think would be like that ordinance would be candidates definitely my candidate support definitely without making it delay like I'm Sanjana being attacked again and that would be from like from behind as well that would be sometimes that ordinance would be candidates like scenario that I'm looking for the game. Okay, so like the plane of prevention right now is that independent right now being selfish and like betraying Janhi and starting the process all by feel on like function Janhi who like help from like definitely like feeling the scenario to be like once like the independent guy would be like right now will be like without much period delay will be crossing like the bridge and at that point I'm looking like it will be the Janhi alone left to like cross the bridge and like the moment like the independent guy will be crossing like the bridge I'm looking like Sanyon that giving maybe giving a stare to them and given that while Sanjor would be heading back towards like the bridge to let's say that it's like the finance and maybe that like stare happening if like Sanjor maybe by now if like Sanjor have figured out by now for like uh the baby being that of that Janhi and like the MP not only Janhi but also of like belong to like the die as well with the platform like at that point I'm looking like Sangyong without even staring at all. I think the Indian guy like once like Indian guys would be crossing the bridge. Like I'm looking like the scenario to be at that point. It being only Junti alone that would have to like cross like the bridge and is like the scenario that I'm looking. And at that point, like as soon as like the Indian guy will be crossing like the bridge, like Sangyong will be about it. At that point, the was bring like really the instantly that the speed of like the jump will be increasing to like its next and final stage which will be way faster. And at that point, I'm looking at the Indian guy as well as Andron, like looking at like Jansi, who would be only here and like on the other side. And basically at that point, and at that point, I'm looking like Sandro at that point, still shouting out once again, shouting out to like Jun-hee while there was only a single minute left and with that high fear of like the help of film and like Sang-yeon with that absolute selfless behavior of like Sang-yeon. So at that point, I mean, Sang-yeon at that point still shouting out to that Jun-hee that basically do not worry that he will still save her with the element like Sang-yeon will be shouting at that point and like as like after shouting that like as Sang-yeon be about to run back into like separate back to just to like save Jun-hee like as Sang-yeon will be about to run back into like at that point is when I'm looking like then he going guy totally quickly suddenly holding Sang-yeon because like by then like the guilt would be so extreme about like the individual guy that like and eventually they wouldn't be able to like take it. That's really with like him having to like witness like basically a total stranger like Sang-yeon like totally risking putting his life in such to such an extreme risky situation just to like save Jun-hee who's like actually nobody to like Sang-yeon while like Jun-hee who's like supposed to be so important for like the individual guy and is like the mother of their baby like basically that basically that just like the individual guy still betraying Jun-hee while like a total stranger like Sang-yeon like so he's willing to like totally to put his life into such an extreme risk to that a stranger like Jun-hee like that would be totally deep down creating that absolute guilt and that absolute feeling of shame about the exact individual guy is that I'm looking like the individual guy at that point stopping instantly holding Sang-yeon's hand as like Sang-yeon able to run back into like the you know say and like I'm looking like the individual guy at that point holding tightly on like Sang-yeon's hand and like the individual guy pushing Sang-yeon back towards like all the remaining Squid candidates who would have already crossed like the this standing like the scenario that and then like I'm doing like one guy like running and like trending across like the bridge with like the scenario that I mean man fully jumping like that speedy jump rope and making it back towards like and making it toward back towards like the other side towards where like Jun-hee would be at that point shocked at like seeing what like the different guys like like the scenario that I'm different and at that point I was looking for Jun-hee that would be like trying even more and like would be shouting out to like the different guy as to like why did he do it like would that he shouldn't have done that would be along the line from the maybe like the different guy at Jun-hee at that point would be feeling that guilt as well from her side as well because of like even though that with like the winners from that MGCoinGuy guy have got by far like so far like and still Jun-hee would be still even while Jun-hee even saying like as for like the Jun-hee not wanting from the MGCoinGuy guy to be investing of baby like still and the deep down like Jun-hee might have had that like against that preference a tiny extent of like at least like some comfort as for like her baby at least having still like the individual guy there will be that same side of like thinking of like certain like Jun-hee but like there will be that one side of Jun-hee who would be like not wanting like the individual guy anywhere near her baby but like there will be that other side of like Jun-hee who will be totally thinking that is the like at least having like the individual guy with like the baby would be far better than like the baby having absolutely nobody at all that take care of it. Maybe along the line, it will be a place feeling for like Jun-hee. So like I'm doing one like then when I according to my different thing will be completing like the problem so at that point I take down like Jun-hee might have had that like a certain extent of like certain extent of like a feeling of release that at least from this point on like for like the baby at least like the baby has like Winston guy will get on the line like a certain extent of like a feeling of really that might have happened with like Gandhi at that point. But like I'm all that might have been shockingly destroyed at the moment. She might have seen like 20 when that crossing back as like only 1 minute would be remaining like the Indian guy that as that will be shockingly with the Indian guy sprinting back onto the couple slowly the next phase. That is was like from Gandhi's point of view at that time that would only thing that if like the Indian guy tries to like cross like the bridge while carrying Janti then like especially then the one guy won't be able to like do it as a line. Especially like by then like by the time that the going guy would be making it back towards like chunky like by then like I'm looking like maybe only 40 seconds alone actually and just like the now is that so like at that point like chunky would be so he from her point of view like would be thinking absolutely no chance at all of like jumbo being able to like suffer that way like the baby having absolutely no one be along the lines of that absolute fear that like junkie will be having it's like my good impression. So definitely. Yeah, like I'm looking like the Indian guy that as like Jansi would be shouting at the Indian guy, like Indian guy like straight away running towards her and being okay and like quickly carrying her from like the Indian guy back and basically telling Jansi to like hold on tight and I'm looking like the Indian guy taking that fine print across like the prints and everything like splitting them as a print for like into the scenario where like MGCoinGuy to be like a that is load on like MGCoinGuy like being like a fixed struggle for like a with like extreme least speedy like JumpRope swing, which will be at that point will be happening like a still like the MGCoinGuy would be struggling and screaming to that absolute pain of that jumping with like a lot of junkies and that street thoughts that to jump off and everything. So like I'm doing that the independent guy that probably making it to like the halfway point and complete the pretend that it's going on making that jump through from like the halfway point gap of like like the moment like the independent guy will be landing with like junkies on his like shoulders. Like at that point like the independent guy as like junkies falling on to like the and at that point, I was looking like the time the sprint would be that maybe that 20 seconds ago remains like the scenario. And at that point, I'm looking like definitely Sanjon back we are running into that bridge and basically quickly Sanjon picking up Jansi and like Sanjon crossing the bridge exactly one like the time would be that a single second will be remaining at that point when I was like Sanjon will be crossing like the bridge with like Jansi and like at the going guy that way of being able to like make it with like the collapsing instantly once like time road the time of your like was another that is sitting on the left. So like the being on preemption right now and for like the civilian workers that are right now scanning like other civilian workers so we don't even fully aware of like near betrayal of the civilian preemption. So like the civilian preemption right now is for like that civilian worker totally allowing those near as well as like the number of teams to game worker to for their for the whole job right now is like kind of a scenario that I'm using. And like the reason would be solely due to that bonus like officer. Because like I'm saying like the last thing like the job would want would be for like the VIPs to like find out about the issue for such an issue and supplement it because like the person will only afraid of like such a thing happen like the doctor will be most likely having to face like the frontman and will be getting in trouble with like the frontman might be the case in the like to carry out like the execution of both me or as well as like the South Korean candidate that actually still outside the game building might be also for like them being right now allowed that allowed out of that Brazilian building in the name of like the water but calling job right now might be the case that we don't finish. Okay, so like the minimum pyramid right now is definitely for like of the good like selfie substitute thing like that like happening or like anything like maybe eventually once like that stealthy substitute thing would be eventually like down to the attack and trying to like eliminate that near as well as like the fast shooting candidate and the it could be in that attack that and something maybe setting up give like the fast shooting candidate to eliminate as well and near totally managing to like still survive until the point where like near as well you'll be about to get eliminated. But like I'm putting my share, like I'm putting like it will be at that point that like I'm putting Jun-hee and team will be finally making it to like the game and then maybe that will be making it to that location and like Jun-hee's team like that attack within Jun-hee's team and the pursuit things happening at that point and that totally resulting in that Neil alone managing to like survive that point. So it's like the scenarios there. And then I'm looking like even so like then I'm looking like technique before like Jun-hee and his like team would be that way making it to like be melting and creating into like limiting like I'm thinking like one like example and his team would be like eliminating like the first thing like at that point I'm definitely an interaction totally happening between like Jun-hee and New York. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for where that New York at that point would be feeling as like we are that moving up into with like some ultimate process goal of like sharing that the first new candidate being lost like at that point that New York is the only thing along the lines of like they along the lines of like basically at this point like basically just that little girl who's like unwell having lost her father through the elimination of like the thought being ended. Like at that point, like we also probably seeing her own daughter like to even more of great extent in that girl who's like unwell, especially with like her sort of situation as well, with that her daughter not having her mother besides her like basically definitely I'm looking that video at that point will be definitely would have fixed enough. That would be like the elimination of like witnessing like the elimination of the fast food candidates like would be create such an extreme trauma in like Neo sector in the scenario that I'm putting. And at that point I was like Neo turning even more cold and like Neo at that point totally fixed it fixing in her mind to like only to give it her absolute everything and even if it's through Neo getting eliminated in the process to like ensure that like Neo like destroys that and is able to like take away that at least the skills extent of at least to a certain extent of like the money in like the last piggy bank and basically get towards like the hospital and be able to like save that the those like unwell or like if like me was like lucky and like me was able to like that again was like top fire and like me also thinking about the anchors like me also be feeling at that point that basically with like other things done and just feeling like I'm the you know at that point also feeling like the possibility of that basically you know having a chance to like probably be able to like get that money and also maybe be able to like make it back to like the mainland and be there for that little who would have lost a part of that. It's like the eventual other possible scenario that so that way like number two like attaining up between like new and like jump up and just being like what do they get happen just like the scenario that is being on the nursery. Also like the minimum frame right now not for like the most fully generate like because of animation that on her revealing like the right story of her and has one like and they're doing that extreme thing that is so that we it's just no matter the ambition that like even though the lab might have played that major role in like basically in trapping and like basically having like the proper job that all these like and the well of state in which like all this like game candidates like had at one point in like the past in their life getting destroyed at past and that something like that might have been only enough like plan to like that way to eventually lure them into to get them into like an extremely left-ridden states and that it like into lure them into like things like that enough might have done this past in that like still like the fact that like basically Sangyeon even deciding to like focus like sponsoring splitting and everything things like that was born on like Sangyeon's own win and own for like certainly I got the impression that like, since that had representing like Sangyeon white leading Sangyeon and that way like Sangyeon losing its thought still the like eventually this would be right now in like the presence with like Sangyeon right now holding on tightly to like Jun-hee's baby like I'm over time like time would be a definite right now eventually would be so the thing like Sanjan so has like long that short due to the song for like something like that very same Sanjan like like uh due to like him to certain extent of things right into his life that basically having in like all like the studios right now in like the process having to certain thing like Sanjan getting Sanjan getting another thought like basically fate eventually starting in like Sanjan through like the studios that had destroyed like Sanjan's life and even though it certain extent like Sundance as well had done a lot of mistakes, it had also upset like Sundance that of still going through the games like everything like and with like Sundance correcting a lot of like mistakes. A certain extent of like a mistake, like a mistake processing in like Sundance, getting a lot of again like this like through that done his just like in that the then this like in the scenario that I'm going. So like this number something only which we are putting in like the film to start with creating like and present definitely the individual guy would be definitely asking Sangyo to like probably to give him his like like that like the scenario that I'm putting and definitely I'm looking like Sangyo won't be at all allowing that individual guy. Sangyo definitely would be like allowing that individual guy to see like just let all the space, but like I'm telling that Zangon will definitely be but that actually he doesn't have to be looking at the Indigon guy in his eye and basically would be telling him that basically that the Indigon guy will now be able to like get back uh just like out of like stay on like this bird belongs to Sanjon. It's like Sanjon's spot and here and like somebody Sanjon with that as the serious way and we telling to like the Indigon guy without making it be like there's like simple scenario that I'm looking over the also, like, but me on the so right now, that I said like how back in like the this games and after like the game they are playing this like intermediate kind of like the game kind of like like I'm doing I think the situation happening in like the Dungeon for Korean as like the scenario whenever so like I'm doing like the same kind of that dinner happening for between like the game candidates who as of right now survive that Korea and I'm just gonna like after that like I'm doing that intermediate game I'm just doing that being different from like that exact intermediate game back in like the release like the scenario that yes like I'm doing that in that intermediate game like I'm just before like again in that intermediate game like I'm doing that as that game was everything I'm doing that definitely I'm doing that even though through a different man of skill I'm doing that the scenario being that players ending up eliminating that getting eliminating each other just like the scenario that I'm also portraying so definitely that way like I'm different like usually the scenario happening where like I'm different both like MGCoinGuy and Sanjay in that room just to like the point out that not being able to like say the baby is like the scenario that I'm moving. So like at that very last crucial situation is when I'm referring that where like the fate of like the baby will be hanging on the line like I'm referring that. And that point when I'm referring like the team of like Jun-hee as well as like Neo as well as like Jun-hee's team will be like making that correct into that exact to get who like the scenario that I'm doing, and that being how like the baby will feel is like the scenario that I'm doing and the yeah, so like I'm current right now is definitely for like in like the voting stuff like the first game of that lifting that the baby as well being made to that vote by like system of this like the scenario that I'm doing as to like how exactly that would be happening like possibly like a scenario where like one of like the studio worker like according to like the orders of like according to like the genetic orders of that the ferment info like I'm saying that first game of bringing two pictures like one picture will be containing that the photo of like or like the picture of like the X button and like red X button and like the other picture will be having like the photo of like picture of like the blue or button is like the scenario that I'm looking at like the game of that at that point like kneeling down in front of like the baby and like showing these two photos holding these two photos in front of like the baby and at that point, like the photo that like the baby would be touching would be considered as like the baby's voting. That's like the scenario that I'm explaining. So like that way, like I'm going to like the baby's with absolutely no knowledge like the baby ending up touching that the blue photo of like the over to like continue playing the game. Like this is the scenario that I'm going to do the right. Okay, so like the Canadian train which right now like that the point that like majority of like the remaining players like walking towards like the baby like I'm putting that definitely I'm going right now for like the game of those stopping those majority not like the SBA candidates right now that they're getting so close to like it's like the scenario that I'm looking for. And I'm looking at that point for like game of those like telling them to do that voting with like the scenario that I'm looking at that point. So like definitely I'm looking like in the voting as well I'm looking like resulting in like the voting ending up seeing that the end result of the voting ending up seeing that to continue playing that against like the scenario that I'm looking for. Right? So definitely I'm preferring that still I'm preferring maybe for us to be like a high like stage in like the voting, but like I'm trying to be that sooner vote by like that maybe that would be like voting to like continue playing the game that would be that so the single vote like I'm something like the result voting result ending up with like them deciding to like the result ending up with like then time to like continue playing the game like the scenario that I'm yet like I'm the friend of me at that point like them being invited for like that another dinner I think like in like 2020 for like all the remains are in place of like the scenario that I'm doing. But like this time like I'm doing after like the dinner like I'm doing like maybe some other thing that will be that provided to all of like speaking candidates after like the dinner like the scenario that I'm doing. So that then I'm going like then in that after like having the dinner like during my time like once again like this like for situation that's what like a specific game like doing like have like the night time like for scenario that and so like all those like majority of the became candidates at that point in like the middle of the night to be ganging up towards like Sanjay. And I was going at that point that for like scenario being like they are being only like the MGCoinGuy as well as the alone to that by that who would be like the friendly trying to like protect like Sanjay protect like the baby like the scenario that I'm going to like so them I'm going like them collectively struggling against like the majority of the against like the majority of the remaining surviving city candidates who will be like young towards it's like the scenario that I'm referring. So like I'm referring in that whole attack like I'm talking like definitely I'm referring by the like I'm referring even when it as well as like the given guy on would just keep repeating to like get and like would be definitely determined to like perfect like the various for and I'm like meaningful as well I'm referring like at that point would be that would be feeling that definitely is that as for like the previous to be candidate being such extreme acting in such extreme linguistic manner, even with like the job that has been that means you had even from like the saying that the film is still strongly feeling that so like I'm putting into as well totally depending on protecting like the Sanjo and the ladies like the scenario that I'm looking at and I'm gonna feel I'm going to bring like while holding on tight to like the really will be biting off all the all those like all of like the other majority of like the CPS players like the scenario that I'm like by enjoying the like the babies like the scenario that I'm like so like eventually I'm going lag that for flash eventually resulting in lag Mintu as well as like the MGCoinGuy getting eliminated like the scenario that I'm looking at. And that's when I'm looking like simply just like Sanjon and like the baby alone that point with like the majority of like the CDM candidates like at that point like surrounding Sanjon and the baby at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking at. At that point Sanjon will be pleading and begging to like them do not do that and basically at that very last second is when I was on like the infiltration of like Neo and like Jun-hee and his team want to like being ended up happening. It's like the scenario that I'm doing and solely due to that reason alone like I'm doing that the baby getting saved is like the scenario that I'm going to bring. Okay, so like tension right now, the platform is sure right now struggling to like convince like the police guy about like this video. Like I mean right now, like I'm looking the flavor like scenario to be like no matter what Joy will be if Joy being after everything to like try to convince like the police guy, but things still not at all being convinced at all. And even starting to think like Joy is like crazy it's also the flavor to the image. So like I'm wondering like it should be at that point that I'm wondering like the police chief would be walking into like the station into that room and I'm wondering that I would be hearing like the shoutings of like the correct shoutings of like so it feels like that police guy to like trying to like convince him about like the citizens about like the people in like the red uniform and everything and the mask and everything like it would be this dialogue of like story that like police chief would be hearing like the moment he would be stepping into like the station it's like the scenario that I'm and instantly like that will be getting to like attention if you like jump from having tried to like convince like the way see in like the past just really about this very same thing. So like I'm doing the benefits straight away hearing that kind of like I'm just straight away will be walking towards like joy. And I'm going like the police chief getting at that point getting the biggest shock at seeing like some exact mark and like do what already for like exactly like how Tempo had told me about like and Sanjon as well. I think in the past had like complained and everything. So like I'm straight away that's it. I'm the like maybe that's a point where like finally most Joy will be having the like voice heard finally and believed by someone is like the scenario that I'm looking for and Michael to real so like from that point on about the 20,000 created like I'm doing straight away like the police teams like asking like surely probably asking like Joy about like everything he knows so far about like the games and everything and like Mr. Joy would be like telling a certain extent of everything he have been through and everything but like Mr. Joy definitely will be showing that urgency to like the police chief and will be telling the police chief to like how extremely urgent procedure it is that they have to get as soon as possible to like to finding and making it to like the and basically even more urgency as well like then Joy having to like phone and tell Janko about like the boatman path being iterated and connected to like experience. Like the scenario that I'm looking at like Joy was shouting out to like the police chief, so, like the police was straight away giving the phone to like Miss Joy. Joy straight away phoning Janko and telling Janko that path is like the right and I'm looking at that point I'm looking like definitely and like Miss Joy would be on top of that, like instead of straight away sending the like photos of like the civilian uniform and like the mark like as like evidence that that Joy has found in that part song that really so like the moment like Jumbo being looking this like message as like evidence like I'm something like the moment at that point it's Jumbo being soft but at that point from the ring back is like right now we'll be keeping that sharp eye on like Jumbo like I'm looking like will be at that point right behind Jumbo and will be seeing this message as well. Especially like the scenario that I'm doing. So like the moment Jan Ho be seeing this message and Jan Ho be shocked like I'm doing like Jan Ho getting attacked by like one possible scenario that I'm looking for the way. So that I'm still and I'm looking for that for one possibility that I'm looking that I'm sitting on this for like this was happening in like the middle of the night while all the remaining team members of like Jan Ho would be asleep. Jan Ho receiving this message and Jan Ho deciding to like step out of like the room in like the boat to like check this message and at that point that Jan was probably seeing this like message from this joy like evidence counting to Park being a traitor and at that point that like Park can see from behind attacking and trying to like put that Janko as well out of like the boat but like that's attempt failing and like but still I'm doing that Park managing to cause to an extent of injuries to like Janko and that Park would be able to put Janko out of the boat like the remaining team members like leading up and gone out in Park but like the scenario that actually is like one of the scenarios that I'm looking for, like the other probability that I'm looking at, you know, this definitely for like the moment that can hold you receiving this that photo message evidence from that so as for like marketing and later at that point, so, like example, hearing like the sound of like someone something falling onto electricity, and that will be only part of that the rise to electricity, making the state of like the boat, while that most likely having set up some sort of like a secret explosive that which might be hidden within like the boat of that part for question of the situation that part step what recently having that seen like seen like Junko that routine with like the part that approach that like basically that turning off like the timer for like the explosive and that basically stop so that approach basically jumping out of like the boat with like license and I think that escape and that explosive at that point then that happening without before like Junko could even react yeah like with like Junko being I'm referring to scenario to be Junko standing on like the side of the boat and that way like even with like the boat exploring like Junko alone managing to survive while the end up the remaining of Junko meeting get like Junko losing consciousness and Pop only using the light switch that go swimming and going up to like the making it to like the game island so we seeing the close by from that they will be at that point while Junko on the other hand like losing consciousness and like watching a show on like the game island it's like the other possible scenario that I'm using on the predict and the and at that point, I'm liberating that jump also being threatening like the development tools that pass to like totally reveal like the location coordinates of like game and basically by threatening to like eliminate path secure of tools and they straight away like path revealing it to like path will be only getting scared at that point and path will just revealing the location coordinates to like jump straight away setting like the location coordinates of like the game island straight away to like this choice like form Mr. Choi and straight away the police chief like finding out the location coordinates of like the game island and a huge the police chief along with the like a huge team of police work like along like Mr. Choi like setting up to make it to that location coordinate of like the game island straight away. It's like scenario that I will bring. That way and but like through that threatening to like eliminate path like and that way like jump over like and single generation jump over like only threatening to eliminate path and like telling paths to like to to like quickly take them to like the Studian Island like basically that way like quickly getting them to like the Studian Island and basically and like example and team would be like only making it to like Studian Island and like so we progressing the whole like Studian Island at that point itself and like the first your fame of like the officer like attacking like Neo as well as like the powerful Indian and that attack like powerful Indian like eliminated and like Jumbo State like running into like super team and attacking and eliminating like the team Neo getting saved Neo alone like surviving and like Neo deciding the team up just like Jumbo team and Jumbo teams as well for late maybe also like by the time they will be making that like Jumbo team as well will be noticing how Neo will be fighting back against like the civilian network like Neo herself like wearing the civilian network also like done how probably eventually ending up hosting her. This is like the scenario that I'm putting that way. New York along that Junko Street, straight into that the studio building, and basically that Junko and that team like making it to like the studio candidate or by that time like the intermediate studio after like the studio and before like studio was the taking place. And at the end, simply remember that for these boxes that are right now, multiple boxes that are provided for each of the studio candidate, like I'm saying like each of those boxes will be contained by definitely have three membership. So that definitely by the time that the during that intermediate game it will be take place during that my time that and while like Sanjon will already corner like and that the babies that we getting saved at the last second through that the whole kind of things like integration to like CPS candidate who is like living the scenario that is thinking on the well correct. And I'm still going to manage the conversion of like for like at that point like definitely with like the Janko and his like team showing up like and like with their help like and like Janko and Pete like trying to like capture and bring down like the command info as well as the terminals to the workers and like to game building. But like I'm trying to force to fight back against like the uh against like the command info and it's like the end of the forces like and like will be intercepting in like Janko and his team will be getting for like the scenario that is very but like I'm sure as they will be getting cornered by like, from many important like team of the game of like at that point is when I'm looking like exactly for like the team beat of like jump will be making it and I'm talking with like the reinforcement arriving through like the team of like Jun-hee. And like at that point, because when I'm like involved and it's like team of like Squid remains surviving still when what's looking to start getting the picture from manning to the captain, but like from the scenario that I'm looking for. And like the reactors as well by that would be getting captured as well, like the scenarios that I'm looking for. So that in such a situation like I'm doing like me like still Jun-hee they only relate that they will be able to like capture info alive the permanent void are the vector scenario that I'm doing correct. So that's the at that point is when I'm different like once again like that is happening where like I'm different like suddenly as like John Hope would be like so be arresting and that the frontman info and they would be trying to like take him out of like the speaking within like I'm different like at that point like I'm different like San John probably uh which they taking away like the mask of like the frontman info like about the scenario that I'm doing and San John getting the biggest job seeing that like the from like input like the scenario that I've given. And that then at that point like I'm looking like Sandro like in that manner and everything will be changing and I'm looking like at that point like Sandro straight away ordering like the remaining team members of like the team A of Jumbo as well as like the remaining members of like the team B of Jumbo as well. Since that it's like Sandro that's like paying all of them like I'm looking Sandro straight away. But like I told me different works for a language and like to see the space like I'm looking like an embracement of like I'm looking like seeing that it was all in hope when that time like the man was like in hope when that time like like Sanjo basically the embracement and like Sanjo straight away ordering that is happening with like Sanjo straight away ordering that the team remaining survivors of the team A and like the team B of like Janho's team to like totally to like to free like info that by the next info would have permanent info would have been in like a hands of cancellation in like and like the hands of that Sanjon be telling the order to like the team A and team B and like them doing that and I'm the one like as like the whole time trying to like I'm sure like Sanjon totally uh, ordering the team A and team B to that restrain that and stop that jump was like the scenario that that they jump for ending up in like activity kind of situation and that only Sanjon at that point that giving that the baby to that jump to take care of until that until that Sanjon would be playing that challenging that the frontman in hope to that the final to give like the scenario so like that way like the to game getting like Sanjon and like the frontman in hope happening because like because of like luckily how in like the 20 of the game like uh the frontman in hope like villain had like the commanding who had like taken this like general something like the extreme level but like even the like the situation of like really and everything like by the time Sangon they realized that like it was in all along that was like the command and that with like the extreme extreme increase in like the villain of like info connected to like the lady citizen and like making like the dungeon of the games of at that point Sangon really like only and that's the situation that Sangon in like the dungeon was like having badly like eliminators like the thinking and like they hope as well as like the because now with like the other villains like and would try to like eliminate Sanjon as well. Like especially at this point like Sanjon will be totally not about hesitant about like eliminating like info at that point like to another side of them. So like certainly Sanjon will be like only keeping that in his like mind at that point. So it only achieve his goal by like only eliminating info so definitely my premise. So like at that point, I'm for example, like literally would be playing Sanjon that will be to lead info to justice and really that like info needs to be behind. But along the lines of different like Janho would be definitely playing to like Sanjon so that like he Janho would like save his like brother info. But like I'm definitely for Sanjon, Sanjon was only having other plans like Sanjon's like intent would be definitely at that point in case to like ensure to like eliminate info so that like at least Sanjon could only put an end to like the Squid Games again there in that country at least. It would be around the line Sanjon with everything. So like that way Sanjon challenging info to like the final two games. And I'm looking like that good game happening and I'm looking like Sanjon is struggling against like online house. And I'm looking like even towards like the very end like I'm struggling to play like things like the ideology of like in hopes the jump at the in hopes saying as like in hopes with public or for Sanjon in like the studio and that in home be only justifying like ideology at that point and like at that point and calling Sanjon out on like basically even Sanjon eventually having to agree with like info ideology and like Sanjon having destroyed his own ideology by eliminating the and all that like would be along the lines for the Sanjon and at that point like that being interest would be raising would be happening in like Sanjon would be doing Sanjon that tries to lack of the finally with that final pickup for it, which was kind of only ending up unit everything and totally managing like offer and defeat info. And that way like I'm like eventually Sanjon would be totally defeating info and then with Sanjon to be saying his dialogue as well like it's I do use and everything to like to a bad lady defeat injured and defeated info who will be unable to move at that point and at that point I'm like definitely none of the game workers like eliminating, not at all eliminating, so like the scenario that I'm John at that point, like mocking like the two game workers and like the civilians and like even as well as like the scenario that I'm saying. If there's the video and experience that like in with the lady, like the actual environment of like in hope, but always like in hope to be aware of after like towards like the end, might have become aware of towards like the end of like the 2015 students who are like in hope of like the winner. And it might be at that point that like even Ina might have given that info, like the job of Lax become like removed from that and the six might have been what might have happened especially so like info even to like the person who totally totally like absolutely proud of that in uh and everything is definitely my everything he did and everything is definitely answering. So like I'm thinking maybe at that point that I'm like Sanjot maybe telling info that like actually even white info is the only thing that we is like Sanjot that in like the past having lost his like job, sort of job that Sanjot had like basically. And like that being like the problem through which like the Indian candidates who the selection of like the likes of like the Indian candidates each of them eventually ending up getting separate and each jobbing to like students and all this thing like I'm like info will be when I'm fully aware of this problem into like the technical experience. So like even after like enough that like I'm info might have continued on that women's such villains attack at the point that people like and then literally during the into like experience of like seeking candidates like well might have done this, but like info might be like when fully unaware as for like info's own life having gotten destroyed at one point, which eventually ended up with like the info ending up playing like the 2014 experience that as well was like the one of that the villanistic act of like in to probably have since like Nina was like getting extremely old, like Nina might have only want that someone to like carry on that what Nina feels is like this legacy of like this like Nina's connecting of the years. So like that might be so even for like Nina even caring at all about like this info to the point of like destroying info like to that up itself to that video of info to works like yeah, could have info carry on like the whole conduction of like civilians. It's like what might have happened to Cleveland students. So like about just like I'm to the like Sanjong Property that way exposing enough will and basically to info and basically that once like Sanjong will be saying this like if you only at that point that like info will be that softly thinking of like the possibility of like things like father now possibly having to stop doing the one who might have or consciously employed that who knows life and uh, that might have ended up like ending up being part of his games and it's very good and becoming a man and everything even to the person and everything that involves life have raised to like a person all being due to like that realistic act of like China would be along the lines of like that up to realize like that and like only at that point happening to be like info so like I'm thinking at that point like the only person in like inmost like until that point that info might have uh, seen as like absolutely great might have been like in upper like definitely my friend so like that once like info will become to the realization that like in was like a villain in that time and had destroyed info's life as well. It's like I'm becoming that realization and becoming something in like info maybe only at that point like basically info totally being so and basically info totally like it was like calm and composed nature, all that hitting quite at that point. And at that point, I was like exactly like most likely for the scenario to be like expecting like the elimination of like the lucky guy involved as well, like getting eliminated is like in the scenario that I was going and also and the all happening right in front of a screaming for screaming jump. There's like in the scenario that I'm before the piano. Also, like was new prevention right now for like the punishment like the relation of for like the government was having gambled to give 10 years back and have paid fine as well back then like and so at least like right now it's like the 2024 students that like taking place so like 10 years back so like and like of new person as of right now when if that basically pass the boardman pass might have been like the winner of like the 2014 students might have been the case something in the framework and info being like the winner of like the 2015 Squid Games. And that way, like I was considering like even like the Rakiji guy as well. Right now, I'm considering might have been like the winner of maybe that the 2016 Squid Game might have been the case with the Cleveland Indians. So like this might have been the reason for like part in part that photos at like start of home that that the government part having photos of him that like both Shin-ho as well as like the Rajali guy as well. Might be due to the statements definitely so that definitely might be the reimbursement right now is for like two possibilities. Either like Ilna might have actually been like the person who had to like created like this like experience in that country. It's like one possibility that another right or like the possibilities for like experience possibly have been created back in like 1999 by like totally somebody else and not at all by Ilnam, but like I'm saying, maybe Ilnam might have been like the winner of the very first season in like 1999. Back then, like that very first game, like it might have been Ilnam that might have been the winner, and like the person who might have been like the skin dinner person who might have created like the game might have been a totally different person, but like he might have been extremely an old person. So like I'm looking at eventually that even though he might have it might have been by that age that like he might have managed to that be able to that have that all the preparation as well as like the money as well as like everything ready to begin and start and execute that game building like game building by the game island and even to even execute like a Squid Game that it might have been a long dream of like villains kind of a dream of that villains create of like this Squid Game but like I'm doing that it's like we might have wanted to make it a reality, but like I'm that he might have faced a lot of setbacks so that like I'm like long term dream by the time he might have achieved the stream of that and might have created like the game the Squid Games in like 1999 like the creator might have been extremely old by then definitely might have been and under the like it might have been so that enough that might have been like the winner of that the 1999 with the Squid Game definitely might be the case like the possibility that I'm looking and after winning like the very first game that I'm looking at and Vietnam might have been while playing like the 1999 game like I'm doing like Vietnam might have and played the games in such an extremely realistic manner definitely what might have happened. So like even after getting like the reward money but like Vietnam might have been like obsessed with like the two games that I'm playing that in that way might have called like the creator of like game like and they might have told him that like he wanted to like work as like a was to game work for free might have been what might have happened. So like maybe that way that in that fact that might have even worked as like a studio work but maybe for a while before eventually and what might have happened might have been that the creator of like those studios who might have been extremely old that he might have got extremely sick. So like I'm looking that uh before that inmate like he might have handed over like the reins of like the speaking kidnap might have been what might have happened if that was a particular and so like maybe since then like kidnap might have been that conducting like the speakings since then might have been what might have happened if like was a particular yet like I'm still thinking remember to remember that like kidnap definitely might be the actual father of info definitely might be the reference and if that's the case, then what you might have done so becoming like the actual creator of like this game, which began in like 1999, might have totally exactly in like a single pattern might have totally destroyed that the life of that Inam to like eventually trap and get Inam into like a current kind of like a situation and lure him now to like the student might have been what might have happened about which like maybe Inam might have not even realized even to that Inam's like last uh, might have been like the days spending on this convention for like that might have been what might have happened in like in them like it also definitely might be very unpredictable. So like maybe like in them might have back during like the 2020 games during like the fourth games in like of like the Marvel game in like 2020 game when Kinnam had basically played the Squid Games with like Sanjon and basically Kinnam I think that hadn't figured still around that time that is uh after like that intense game was over that like it was for like Kinnam to experience like what experience like how it felt to play the Squid Games back then but even like the actual situation might have been that Kinnam might have been someone who might have played and won like the 1999 very first William might have been the case, and Ilham might have probably William really enjoyed Ilham like journey through like the because like Ilham might have been such an extremely crazy person. So like Ilham might have probably William probably enjoyed like with Ilham's journey throughout like the of like the Squid Games in like the 1999 very first Squid Games all the way to the point of Vietnam because might have been what might have happened definitely not the pyramid. So like I'm like maybe it might have been in like the very second Squid Games that took place in the 2000 like I'm thinking maybe even by then the exact in Korea for Squid Games might have got a suit and he might have straight away given that serines to like conduct games and to the assets and everything to like uh, might have been what might have happened. So like I'm doing since like the after like the very first good game in 1999 was over like I'm saying maybe it might have been since like the 2000 like the year 2000 and like it might have been still now that might have been conducting like this good game. So like I'm doing that realistic kind of like a thrill that like and enjoyment that like enough might have got while uh, playing like the games in like 1999 like enough might have been missing that since then especially my after taking over the reign and after like being like the owner of the games and conducting the games since then like Ilna might have been missing that realistic kind of thrill. So like maybe that might have been the sole reason for like Ilna maybe might have been desperately wanting to like once again experience like this weekend. So like it might have been maybe that the possible reason has been like why in that slowly might have been it due to like that sheer lack of content that made in maybe in like the uh, 2020 Squid Games like in that the first Squid Game of like the Marvel Squid Game that in deciding to play like the Squid Game with like Sanjong might have been what might have happened is like the other positive that I'm considering. And I'm still thinking about the impression that like the old man with like dementia would definitely might definitely not be killed on. So like the old man with dementia who had basically played like the first three games in like the 2020 games like would definitely might definitely not at all be killed on. Like Kinlam might have only still be after the third good game might have still be eliminated like the old man with dementia while he might have went out to the outcome of something and might have Ilna might have disguised himself as like the man of Ninja and might have entered into like the Squid Game, the fourth Squid Game, into the Squid Game ended up and all that might have been what might have happened to me. Because like I'm sitting to my friends and that like old man like Ninja might have been actually Sangyong's like ultimate power might have been the case. Definitely might be the person for and like Ilna might be his like identical power might have been also like the opposite that I'm and definitely my Victoria production that I'm sitting on to that basically this might have been definitely the reason for like info back in like the very beginning of like the red light, green light to get in like the 2020 games while like the old man with dementia and Frank were all in like that playground about to play like the red light, green light skill game. Even back then like the fact that like info the frontman info was like shown like reporting to a certain someone that like the preparation for like the very first for like the first game is complete. Like that reporting definitely I'm referring like the frontman info might have reported to that the original uh, info might have been like the case that we met people like definitely that old man with dementia who during that point who was like shown as like info watching on the screen while info like looking at the screen of like the red light green light game as it was about to begin. Since like during that exact time, you know, like Sanjong like Ronan Kinecha was like in that play area about to play the red light green light game. That Ronan Kinecha might definitely be only like identical brother of like in the man won't be active in them. Might see the dates that he might have been very interested in tilting also. And definitely especially also since like unlike the fourth trillion of like the Marvel trillion, which like Vietnam had like consciously delayed to like the very end so that like Vietnam could probably managed to like escape even while letting Sanjon defeat Vietnam like still the fact that Vietnam could probably escape without getting eliminated solely due to like the nature of like the box trillion being that of like the Marvel trillion simply like the trillion back in like 2020 before like the Marvel trillion were like the cut off war trillion as well as like the shape cutout games which like and like even which like was like such games which in which like Vietnam couldn't just like strike all the other Australian candidates and would like simply cancel the case uh, and survive like I mean and that definitely that so that definitely in those previous games it might have been definitely like Sanjay's like father who might have been like the old man with like dementia that might have played the game all three of like the initial games in like 2025 Vietnam might have been like the uh, person that might have played like the fourth game of like an offensive game along with like Sanjay. just so that while giving the order to set up the box games to be the marbles to game so that in that to experience this game once again and also ensure to basically survive that's the game even if in now will be along the lines of what might have happened in the past in this definitely my consideration construction. And definitely I'm also still taking the mind of the mention that as for the instruction of info in the past even beginning with the point where info had accepted the price from as a specific customer, a client of the company which info had was working at and that specific client who's who might have registered by a totally different name who's face that info might have never seen but that client who offered that money, which info had accepted, which resulted in info getting framed as someone who had accepted the bribe, and which was the starting point of the entirety of the response to the info into eventually spiraling into info, eventually ending up entering into experience and jump with the front man and everything. I'm giving that specific client in that workplace of info that have offered that money info all the way back then that specific client might have definitely the identity of that specific client in actuality might have been that might have been definitely the case. Might have been very much in that absolutely on as well. Also, the mention right now that the chunk of along that path and you know seeing checking the map to approximate where exactly the identity that comes to definitely right now check the really considering the amount of conditions for definitely in junk phone there would be message popping up on this choice phone. It's the scenario that I'm putting, and definitely this lacking choice. It's already she's just struggling to convince that 20% is right now talking about the crimes Miss Joy has done in the past and the point definitely still as to still before situation as to how Mr. Joy might turn it around would be through Mr. Joy telling that policeman about Mr. Joy as for Jun-hee the ex-policeman Jun-hee being part of the sport thing that of Joy trying to convince us maybe along the line that would be the turning point of the scenario and that I'm going to bring would be only the case if that police chief who in the past example has really tried to convince about this police doesn't show up to that station during that point and who's all this if he doesn't show up then I'm going to bring the scenario as to how Joy will be managing to convince that other police guy I'm going to bring it might be through Joy telling him about Jan-ho's involvement in Joy's for in the whole Joy and his team's whole mission to putting down soldiers and everything. So I'm thinking definitely that police man I'm thinking since I think a while since Jan since it's been I think a while since Jan-ho has quit his job at the station and has turned into and switched to his job at the draft I'm still definitely in the station there definitely there might be the list of the previous police officers who had worked at the station. So especially I would bring this story telling that policeman about Janko and also that policeman not even knowing who Janko is here I'm the story telling him about definitely he used to work there and I was fine. At that point I'm hearing that police guy looking up the database and I'm looking on the TV and him totally finding that Miss Joy is not lying about Janko. So when Miss Joy at that point totally begging that police officer to that he should just he just want to send a single message to Jumbo and that's it. So eventually I'm looking him totally allowing Miss Joy to send that message and I'm doing the message Miss Joy would be sending to Jumbo will be I'm putting a photo of a photo of student uniform, red uniform as well as the mark that in Miss Joy's option and Miss Joy would be adding the message to that it's a message that we need that that he has found it at Sanford House. So this message is what I'm looking without splitting the message information that I'm looking without created at all Janko would be getting definitely my think rate. So and definitely I'm looking this time definitely I'm looking that police officer as well definitely will be definitely wanting to phone and speak to Janko as well. It's very good scenario that I think and my contribution. But like before, like the police officer, so like even seek to like jump on, but leaning off with the public that even before that, like the boardman path would be talking make it smooth. And after the point that for like the likely scenario right now, the suffering would be most likely as like jump off while receiving while seeing like message like probably Mr. Bar like ending up like seeing this like happening to like see like the message of like the evidence in that in like Junho's phone, even though Junho will be trying to hide it. And still they're giving like the message like I mean like still by the time like Junho that police guy will be phoning Junho to find more about like the strains of joy like I'm just like while Junho and at that point I'm just Junho stepping out of like the room within like the post and stepping outside to like self to speak to like the police guy. And I'm just like it would be at that point that I'm just like the maybe like the government part that up with stealth slipping out of like the moment, trying to like just eliminate Junko. And I'm going during the like flash like I'm going to be when I'm going to bring that already that one among that the team members of like Junko who already have a certain extent of freedom over staff like that trained guy like I'm going to make him for me by then like will be stopping like the boardman and like the team will be going up and like will be that way stop. Okay, so like definitely my pretty understand right now. That's what like about my part right now. Finding out actually like a bunch of joy about like everything is joy that I'm from expecting the movement. And those definitely not pretty understand right now. That's definitely for like the boardman part right now. Like the first thing I would be doing right now on the current using of that day. Then the boardman part I'm looking like the acting character and then looking like the boardman part like while putting on the fake acting as of like in a casual manner like I put in the boardman part to that returning back to like the host in like the board for all the team members and like John host would do in and then was like at that point John host totally asking for like that food court and that John hosting part as for food court like would be along the lines of whispering like John hosting park and then whispering park at that point want to get live and then whispering like make some sort of like an excuse of a life as in like it was like maybe it was like a so or like it was someone from like support in like the mainland or something along the lines of like an excuse of a lie, like I'm sitting back at that point telling Jungle it's like the scenario that I was like. So at that point still something doing like fast without much great delay from within that room like I'm doing like fast without much great delay at all like I'm doing like simply fast like pickpocketing and basically so that I put stuff like I'm putting like fast pickpocketing Jungle phone and basically taking stealing away that Jungle's phone so that I is like the scenario that I'm playing. And Pop straight away casually keeping up with that fake acting and basically Pop probably steadily slipping that phone into like the scenario that I'm doing. That way like I'm putting up once again like in a way kind of like just repeating itself with like I think like basically back when Jumpo had fallen from like the cliff into like the sea like basically at that point that was like after that whole 2020 experience like was like Jumbo having that extreme struggle of that basically of that solely due to like him losing the phone like basically or with like evidence not being able to uh, losing all that evidence connecting to like civilians and not being able to convince like the police and all that like solely due to like his phone falling into like the sea and all that like I'm bring that similar kind of that just repeating itself kind of like a situation once again happening with like in like the present as well like Jumbo like phone totally being stealthily thrown into like Turkey by Pap. And basically that happening exactly like right now with like that one police guy like allowing that bonus joy to like use like the phone like I'm putting like so right now quickly will be taking photos of like the civilian worker uniform as well as like the mask as well as and quickly sending the message to like Jumper's phone uh, saying that basically that he found them at like Pakistan, like basically, but like I'm remembering the moment like that, but like I'm remembering the moment like that message would be getting delivered into like Jumper's phone, like I'm remembering like Jumper's phone maybe at that point that would have for being thrown into like the sea by Pak, like during the scenario that I'm remembering that way like Jumper's still not realizing it's just like the scenario that so definitely and straight away I'm remembering that uh, straight away, like once again keeping up that fake chat with acting and like as a like thinking of and really once again stepping out of like that room and once again phone, and like at that point, I'm looking like Park would be straight away phoning like one of like the game workers, like someone comes to like the game would be on like the mainland, like I'm looking like Park straight away phoning that visit someone and like telling that person to like straight away that he has like a job to like eliminate this person instead this joy would be along the lines of the like part would be giving that task to like that one person coming to like to games like I mean that the strategy that he would be using would be to like only to go up to that very same station where like Joy is right now holding and basically to go up there and to talk put on a fake account that like he has like some sort of like a complaint against like someone or something. Put that way okay on a fake account and through that excuse of like a complaint that is walking to that body that's a fake acting its way into like entering and infiltrating into like the station where choices like sentence so that like basically in order to like that way to uh, to look for like an opening file that the remaining points of the would be that the striker talking to like make this move and stealth to that up to stealth to try to like eliminate the choice would be the task that I'm referring like would be through this like phone call would be assigning to that one person in like the main that would come to the like scenario that I'm in that way like I'm talking to relate at all like I'm looking like that person like showing up to like the station while sitting on the big acting as like he has like a complaint and everything looks like the scenario that I'm looking for and then that way I'm referring like in part is like the workman part is like I'm definitely I'm referring even while he will be making the second phone call as well to give this task to like eliminate his joy to one of like suppose something like the mainland comes like trillion at that point as well like this phone call of like make another phone call with phone call as well and something like that be jump out from within that room would be noticing exactly like he has noticed right now the current phone call between that apart and like the policeman like and like can be noticing like the repeated phone calls suspicious kind of like phone calls of like uh the boatman part like the scenario that I was doing and that will like like the next decision that like that path would be taken would be to like to that access to like completely slip out and escape from like the boat while setting up like definitely I still remember that like there will be that secret area within like the boat of like the boatman path like there will be a time of explosive that can be that as well as like there will be like a dice to well definitely remember into the like path to that absolutely self like and something like would be quickly would be like picking up like the dice too, and they believe would be also like quickly trying to like activate like the timer of like that explosive. But like I'm during my path would be doing this when I was trying path getting caught red-handed by Jun-hee as well as like the remaining team members, all of them would be at that point, percent along with like them at that point, like scenario by that. So like, that way like I'm doing path. That's like scenario that I'm doing right now. That's for like how path would be getting caught red-handed at that point is like during the scenario that I'm doing and when it's reimbursed. And as for like the situation was like Joy, like I'm referring like the simple scenario being like why that I'm definitely I'm referring right now. As for like Joy even calling out and telling like another police officer to like as much we can work the police chief like I'm just so definitely when the friend which is for like definitely that chief totally showing up into this like situation eventually in that exact critical situation like really scenario that I'm referring to. Like I'm doing by the time like the police chief would be showing up to like the station after the scenario to be are totally maybe put into like the station lockup and I mean, maybe as part of like the strategy, the listed strategy for like that person who would be that with that approach that would be entering into like the police station in the name of like some number for like in order to would be into like civil like in order to like that approach to like eliminate the story and the like in totally making a scene at like the police station and they believe that in order to like have like the policeman like so they put it as well into like the lockup along with like Mr. Church so that like what will be like when beginning to that absolute just like eliminate Mr. Church might be like the attempt to like the kind of like an attempt that I'm like making and that way like I'm the scenario being like and that person being put into like the very same lockup as that of like Mr. Church. So it's like the scenario that I'm looking for and I'm looking like that person with that app would sell like would be like hiding a weapon like and looking like that person with that app just can destroy won't be at all realizing the range of he will be in while being in like the along with that person and I'm looking that person will be like still be building out the black weapon and will be like with that app would just and like him totally while like the policeman will be like described in like that after step like maybe can covering like the mouth of that the joy and they will would be badly injuring the joy. It's like one possibility, possible scenario that I'm looking at. To get like I'm looking before like that person will be about to like eliminate like the joy with like another flow like I'm looking like right during that very last second is when I'm looking like during that time exact time is when I'm looking like the police chief will be like showing up to like the station and like the police chief will be showing up and like I'm looking like that point like the other police guys like I'm looking them casually talking about like this like this person that day was like a rough day and like there being this like person that basically showed up and like really talking about this like games where like people get eliminated and all that like they really like the police guy casually saying that to like the police chief and at that point like the police chief basically like instantly changing and being somebody shocked on hearing that and I'm looking like at that point itself like the police chief like maybe the police guy is going like the police chief at that point that will be like as if like they're all trusted like as if like it's some kind of a joke like them even showing them in the receipt that the mark as well as like the red uniform, the game uniform. And at that point I'm going to receive totally shocked and like police chief that straight away like a that happens is like asking like police officers asking like where exactly that person is and then um at that point, we'll be quickly showing up to that fellow up, and at that point, I'm shockingly finding that this black person who will be with that just George in that law of like trying to like eliminate George. So like and Mr. George is public. So like and at that point, says like the police and all of them that restraining and stopping that person and capturing that person is that and taking the weapon away and like capturing him. And I'm looking like them for the interrogating him as well as like them also like quickly treating like Mr. Joy like the scenario that I'm delivering. And that way at that point itself I'm delivering like even though the scenario that I'm delivering will be like by then like JumpRope for like basically once again getting around and like quickly like I'm skill and delivering like with like them for the catching like the government part and then like I'm doing definitely during the interrogation like in the government part like probably like definitely just asking us like what that phone call was that like related phone call was and like through that interrogation like then getting the information out of that part as well like everything Mr. Choi has done and basically the situation in this like so even currently even being in like the station so like I'm doing that definitely straight away and to bring at that point definitely like there will be another like at the point example like at that point it's actually phoning like the police chief and basically telling like the and like at the point like at that point it's example threatening like the to eliminate like path and basically that way getting like the information of like the location coordinates of like CM island from path and basically example with like the phone of like one of the like email of like and with straight away calling like the station and I'm doing like that way like Jumbo failing like the police chief has got like the location coordinates of like to give island is like the scenario that I'm doing and definitely Jumbo also straight away like even calling like the team lead of like Django as well and telling them as well about like Park as well as Gatineau being traders and like even giving the information out to like them as well as following the location coordinates of like the games like within our like I'm right. That way like I'm looking then like basically Django as well as like his team like basically while threatening like the boatman Park like I'm looking like and forcing him to like take the boat exactly to like the Stygian island. And like I'm bring like without any rush, like that straight away like heading off, like the one day straight away heading off to like the Stygian island. While like the team B as well, like the them seeing like the location coordinates like them as well will be threatening Captain Boat and will be on their way as well behind that the hosting towards like the location coordinates of the Stygian island and like the police chief like basically assembling like a huge force and like maybe even multiple boats and basically will be like getting ready and doing all the preparation to like set off from like the mainland to like exact location coordinate for this game and it's not just like the initial scenario set up to be on the again.